Hello everyone, it's wonderful to have you back for another lecture. In this lecture, we'll focus on the methods related to the char type. Before delving into the explanation of these methods, let's first give you a simple explanation of how methods are structured. This will help you better understand them. Just so you know, we cover methods in detail in our intermediate course. Okay, what exactly is a method and what purpose does it serve? A method is essentially a block of code that is designed to carry out a specific task. Here is an example. Let's illustrate to you the structure of this method for better clarity. First of all, note that previously we used one shape to illustrate each type for better understanding. Similarly, we've chosen this shape to represent the char type. Okay, let's continue. In this simple example, we define a method called sum. This method takes two int inputs, number 1 and number 2, as its parameters. After carrying out its specific task, the method then returns an int value as its output. Alright, as mentioned earlier, a method is essentially a block of code that is designed to carry out a specific task. In this case, the specific task of this method is to add the two parameters that are passed to it. Okay, typically, a method receives one or more inputs as its parameters, performs its specific task, and then returns an output as a result. However, it's worth noting that some methods may not have parameters, or may not return any value, or in some cases, both. Now, let's explore how to call a method in C# through an illustrative example. Let's consider a class called calculator that has a method named sum. To invoke the sum method and store its result in a variable, we use this statement. Based on the structure of the sum method, we need to pass two int inputs as parameters. So, in this example, we pass the values 7 and 9 as the two input parameters for the sum method. Then, the sum method carries out its specific task, which in this case is adding the values 9 and 7 together. Next, the sum method generates a result of 16 and returns it as the output. And since the return type of this method is int, we declare a variable of int type and store the returned result in it. Now, we have a variable named sum that holds the value of 16, which is the result returned by the sum method after adding the two input parameters. All of char methods we describe in the following have a similar structure and they can be invoked in the same manner. Now that we have a better understanding of the method and its structure, let's explore some of the key methods that the char type offers. These methods allow us to perform specific tasks on char values. To begin, let's talk about the isLetter method. This method is designed to determine whether the character falls under the classification of a Unicode letter. This method accepts a char value as input and delivers a Boolean output, indicating whether the character is categorized as a letter or not. This method identifies all Unicode letters, including uppercase, lowercase, and non-Latin characters. Let's take a look at some examples of how to use this method in practice. In the first example, we provided the uppercase letter S as an input. Next, the method verifies whether the input character is a letter or not. And then, the character is identified as a letter, so the method returns a true value. Similarly, the second example passes a lowercase n to the method. and receives a true output as it's recognized as a letter. However, in final example, we receive a false value as the method does not classify the character 7 as a letter. Alright, let's move on to the next two methods, isUpper and isLower. The isUpper and isLower methods are used to check whether a character is an uppercase or lowercase letter, respectively according to Unicode standards. The isUpper method takes a char value as a parameter and returns a bool indicating whether the character is uppercase or not. Conversely, the isLower method takes a char value as a parameter and returns a bool indicating whether the character is lowercase or not. For instance, let's consider the uppercase letter S as an example for both methods. When we pass S to the isUpper method, it recognizes it as an uppercase letter and returns true. However, the isLower method does not consider S as a lowercase letter and returns false. Next, let's consider the lowercase letter n as an input for these methods. The isUpper method does not recognize n as an uppercase letter, so it returns false. However, the isLower method identifies n as a lowercase letter and returns true. The final methods we'll cover in this lecture are toLower and toUpper. Both of these methods accept a char value as input and return a corresponding char value as the result. The key distinction lies in their outputs. The toUpper method transforms the character into uppercase, while the toLower method converts it to lowercase. Okay, let's explore the usage of these methods through two examples. The toLower method takes an uppercase s and transforms it into a lowercase s. On the other hand, the toUpper method accepts a lowercase n and converts it to an uppercase n. Alright, now to see these methods in action, let's delve into VS Code and demonstrate some examples. In these examples, we provide an uppercase s, lowercase n, and the character 7 as inputs to the isLetter method. Let's run the application and observe the results. As expected, the isLetter method correctly returns true for both s and n characters, while returning false for the character 7. Okay, it's time to see the isUpper and isLower methods in action and get a better understanding of their behavior. Let's run the application and see what happens. In the first example, the isUpper method correctly returns true for the uppercase s, while the isLower method returns false for the uppercase n. However, if we change these characters to their corresponding lowercase letters and run the application again, we should get the opposite results from each method. Alright, let's move on to the demonstration of the toUpper and toLower methods in action. Save the file and run the application. As observed in the first example, the toUpper method successfully transforms the lowercase s into uppercase s, while the toLower method converts the uppercase n to lowercase n. Alright, we've concluded this lecture. Thank you for watching. In the next lecture, we'll continue our exploration of the char methods. See you there.